The night of Tuesday, 2nd April 1968, there was prolonged rifle. By the way, this is from page 69 of Sunset in Biafra by Elechi Amadi. On the night of Tuesday, 2nd April 1968, there was prolonged rifle fire not far from the village. Although Port Harcourt was now being encircled by federal troops, I did not think they could be anywhere near my village at that time. Still, the intermittent shooting disturbed me. The next morning, we were told that some federal soldiers had been killed in a skirmish. There was to be a general combing to ensure that no enemy soldiers were hiding anywhere. Villagers were urged to go and have a look at the slain enemy soldiers so that they would realize that the victories claimed over the radio were not mere propaganda. Joining the considerable stream of sightseers, I reached a large pit into which waste crude oil from an oil well had been diverted. Remember what we read? How did we get here? We got here from the book by Nebuchadnezzar Douglas. We're talking about certain bodies floating on. Let me read that again. Guys, this is how I study. So, try and understand. It helps us connect things, right? So let me read that part again. It says, on or about March 27, I'm reading World Opinion now, Ojuku's Rebellion and World Opinion. It says here, on or about March 27, 1968, after what came to be known as the Battle of One, all the inhabitants of those three villages, what villages talking about? Bolo and Ogu and One in Eleme clan. It says all the inhabitants of those three villages were taken to the Rainbow Town headquarters of the Biafran 52 Brigade in Port Harcourt. The men were separated from women. What happened to the latter I did not hear, so we don't know what happened to the women. So it says presumably they were sent to refugee camps in Igbo land. The men, upwards of 300, I saw at Rainbow Town myself. Who is myself? Who is saying I saw myself? Is Nebuchadnezzar Douglas, the former Attorney General of Eastern Region. He said this, the men I saw myself. They were detained there, accused of having offered facilities for military operations in the area to federal troops. But soon, they became Hausa soldiers. And before long, all Port Harcourt was talking about the Hausa soldiers whose bodies floating in a crude oil pit in an Ikwere village not far from the city had offered entertainment to credulous Igbo men and women in and around Port Harcourt. So Igbo men and women in and around Port Harcourt found that entertaining. But the point I'm bringing from here is that they found their bodies floating. They were Kalabari. They were rivers people. They called them Hausa, and then the next thing their bodies were floating in crude oil pits. Now, since we've established that, let's now go back to the book by Elechi Amadi. Who is Elechi Amadi, by the way? Where is Elechi Amadi from, by the way? Elechi Amadi is Ikwere. Remember that Nebuchadnezzar Douglas also mentioned here that Ikwere people offered some of those Kalabari people accommodation and sheltered them. The Ikwere people, one of them is the one who now wrote this book that I'm about to read now. I'll start again. On the night of Tuesday, 2nd April 1968, who is the Ikwere man? Elechi Amadi. What's the book title? Sunset in Biafra. Please let's power tap, share the live, YouTube as well. Let's share the live. Thank you very much for your support. It says on the night of Tuesday, 2nd April 1968, there was prolonged rifle fire not far from the village. Although Port Harcourt was now being encircled by federal troops, I did not think they could be anywhere near my village at that time. Still, the intermittent shooting disturbed me. The next morning, we were told that some federal soldiers had been killed in a skirmish. There was to be a general combing to ensure that no enemy soldiers were hiding anywhere. Villagers were urged to go and have a look at the slain enemy soldiers, so that they would realize that the victories claimed over the radio were not mere propaganda. Please listen, please pay attention. Joining the considerable stream of sightseers, I reached a large pit into which waste crude oil from an oil well had been diverted. Floating on the oil. This was written in 73, that was written in 68. Floating on the oil were many bloated bodies turned face downwards. Blood was still oozing out from bullet holes in some of them. None of the dead wore any uniform. Why is this important? Remember what Nebo Graham Douglas said. They said they were Hausa soldiers, but they're supposed to be Hausa soldiers. So what would you expect? Camouflage. You expect uniforms, right? So it says here, none of the dead wore any uniform. They were dressed in singlets, shirts, and wrappers, or like we say in Nigeria, wrapper. Then wear singlets. Some of them wear shirts. All of them they use wrapper. The ground around the pit was beaten down, much like a recently used wrestling arena. The sides of the pit bore the marks of hands and feet that vainly tried to claw their way out. For a while I gazed tongue-tied at the sickening sight. Then I began to count the bodies. I stopped at 160 and guessed that there must have been at least 200 bodies. Who were these men who went to war in wrappers? They were rivers people taken from those villages on Bolo, taken into Port Harcourt, and then called Hausa and then unalived. The reason I like to use more than one book, I think you can get it now. The Eleme clan people, thank you, UIG. Let's continue. The next day, the secessionist radio announced that a waterborne attack on Port Harcourt had been repulsed and that the enemy had suffered heavy casualties. This is where people's parents got their information from. The secessionist radio. What did they tell us? The truth? No. It's propaganda. The next day, the secessionist radio announced that a waterborne attack on Port Harcourt had been repulsed and that the enemy had suffered heavy casualties. Then the truth came out. The victims were in fact natives of a riverine village. They had been carted away and slain 30 miles from their home on the pretext that they were aiding the enemy. Does this confirm what Nebo Graham Douglas said? Yes. I actually feel somehow, so I'm trying to pace myself. I'm not go cry for a live stream. The victims were in fact natives of a riverine village. They had been carted away and slain 30 miles from their home on the pretext that they were aiding the enemy. The message was clear. No one was safe. Anyone not in sympathy with the rebel cause could be carried away, shot in cold blood, and labeled a federal soldier. There was a regular picnic at the scene of the massacre. Thousands of sightseers traveled down from Port Harcourt and elsewhere to have a look at the corpses. A man who had escaped was later combed out. Dry leaves clung tenaciously all over his oily body. He looked like Papageno, the birdman in Mozart's Magic Flute. As he tried to make a statement, the hapless man was silenced and led away. After 3 days, the bodies began to stink terribly. I lodged a complaint with the health authorities, and a bulldozer was dispatched to fill in the pit of death. For me, this incident was easily the most harrowing in the entire war. It brought out the horrors of war in their full nakedness. From that point onwards, the life of anyone who openly opposed the secessionists was not worth much.